Well, welcome to the training of the core story, and one of the most exciting experiences that I've ever had over the last 50 years of listening to people's stories. And what we're going to do here is give you the practical, systemic direction on how I do the story. Now, even after I do this, you may develop your own method, but to begin with, this is the method that I've developed. And so I'm going to go through this step by step, and you can watch it and follow with me. Let's just do the basic things. The first thing, I have 4 markers, a red, blue, green, and yellow that I use to mark on the board. And in your core story booklet, which you can go online to coachinglifematters.com and go and you can find and print this booklet out if you don't have it. And so you can print it. And so let's go to the whiteboard first. I use a whiteboard and divide it into 3 sections. And 2/3 of the section is this section here, which is the whiteboard, where we'll actually map and graft the 3-generational story of the person. So that's section 1. And then as you begin the story, on the left side, part 2, are the core beliefs around security and survival. I use the word safe. Affection and esteem, I use the word love. And power and control, I use the word control. So these, at a certain time, will be articulated by the person who's mapping the story, and I'll show you how to get there. And so you put safety, which deals with the gut level person, what they believe by the time they're 12, the heart level, affection, esteem, and then power and control, which deals with the mind. And then at one point after mapping the story, I will ask them to put their arm around their 12-year-old and tell their 12-year-old what their wound is. Everybody has a wound, and they will name the wound, and I'll show you how to get to that. And then there's a core lie, which they will name the core lie. And then we have the core truth. So in the booklet that I've got, on the core story booklet, you'll have these, first of all, the symbol chart. You'll want to learn the symbols. One dealing with divorce and conflict, affairs, adoption, squares if you're male, if there's a tragedy, a jagged line, separation, 1 line, if there's distance in the relationship, emotional distance, a dotted line, if there's sexual abuse, X line, and a double line for closeness, and a circle for female, and then if there's a death, you put an X mark. The red star represents the people in the story who the person experienced valuing them. And at some point in the story, you'll actually put a red star by their name. Now, what we're going to do on this frame 1 is actually frame the story, where you'll have the father and the mother and the brothers and sisters, and then the father's mother and father and brothers and sisters, and the mother's father and mother and brothers and sisters. So before you begin, you're actually going to just put a framework. You'll deal with school, grade school, middle school, and high school, and then religious community, whether it's Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jewish Orthodox, or Reformed, or Christian. And you will put markers and symbols on how they relate. So the first thing you do is you actually frame the story on this side over here, and you learn how to, and you start in the middle. So we're gonna sort of proceed to that and actually do a story. So you've got 3 frames. You got the first one, which is actually the core story, and then you've got the core beliefs. And after you do the core story, we'll come over here to this side, and I will give you the symbols for the story. And we'll just wait for just a moment to do that after we actually have a story mapped. Then I'm going to show you how to help them name their 12-year-old beliefs, their wound and their lie, and then their course truths. Okay, what I've done is just done a fictitious story here and framed it. So I did just exactly what I said I would do. I always start with the father, to name the father. And if he's still living, put his name, and if he has died, which this man has died at 74, and his mother died at 77, and I'll ask, what did your father do for a living? He was an engineer, and the mother was a homemaker. So you get it framed, and then this marriage lasted for 10 years after you get all the players, the father, the mother, and then the brothers and sisters. And what I'll do is, when I ask them who their father is, the first thing I'll ask them is, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And Joe would say, I have 3 brothers, 2 brothers and a sister. I said, where do you fit in? And he said, I'm number 2. So I know that out of 4 children, he is going to be number 2. So I space it out where I've got room to put the oldest, and then he's second, and Kate is third, and then Jim is fourth. And so I bring him all the way down to the kind of at the center, because Joe is the star. So he's a little below the other brothers and sisters. And then I'll say, well, how old, Joe, were you when your parents divorced? And I'll put this down here right under his name, so you know he was 9 years old when his parents divorced. And I'll say, well, did your father marry again? And he said, yes, he married Louise. And how long were they married? Well, they were married 27 years, and then they divorced. And then Mary married 4 other times after she divorced Sam. And basically, I just put down those names. I don't always put the names of the other husbands when it's like this, but I get the framework. And then, how many brothers and sisters did Sam have? Well, he didn't have any. He was an only child. And then her first husband died at 24. So she married again. She married Jack, and he died, and married Lou, and he died. So you just get the frame up there. And then Mary, how many brothers and sisters do you have? Well, she's got 2 brothers. She's the baby of the family. Where were you, the oldest or youngest? Well, she said she was the baby. And she has 2 older brothers, Clem and Luke. And her father was a business owner, and her mother was a homemaker. But it looks like they were married before they got married, and Clem's wife died in childbirth, and the baby died in childbirth. And then Jan, her mother, her husband died, and they had a 21-year-old child. So that was her sister. So that's the frame. So let's just stop right here. So you got the frame. We're going to get the story of how her father experienced his father, how the mother experienced her mother and father, and we'll draw the lines. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'm going to pause here, and I'll put that in there, and we'll come back to it. And you've got all the questions in the book, so that you can just follow the book and just follow the questions in the book, and do dotted lines and close lines and whatever else the lines indicate in terms of family of origin. So okay, so what I did is went ahead and filled in in asking Joe the questions, and all the symbols, the jagged lines, which is conflict, the dotted lines, which are distant. This line here represents cut off. So he was cut off from Mary for 18 years, and she's an alcoholic, and so she left the family. and was not present. And all of these marriages represents marriage and divorce, marriage and divorce, marriage and divorce out there. And then the atmosphere for Joe when he was a boy was chaos and confusion as his parents divorced when he was 9, which we made note of that right here under his name. And then the father married again, and Joe lived in the home with Louise and Sam from 12 on. And it looks like he was close to his father early on, but then when he married Louise, there was conflict and distance from his father. And that marriage lasted 27 years. So what we've got is the relationship with Joe, with his father, with his brother, with his sister, and with his younger brother there. So it gives you a picture. So this is visual, it's cognitive, and it's experiential. So as you do the story, you're going to be experiencing it as you ask these questions. So it's very important that you're familiar with the symbols where you can stay focused on the person as you go through that. And so we filled in up here how the mother experienced her father and her mother. Her father was an alcoholic. She became an alcoholic. And so after you do the story, then you ask a question that are in the book. Who in your life the first 18 years did you experience valuing you? And that's what the stars are about. Who delighted in you when you were growing up? It could have been your dog, it could have been your horse, it could have been your best friend, it could be your grandparent, your coach. You're looking for them to pull out the memory of anybody in their story the first 18 years who they experienced delighting in them. So when they came around, they would light up. And so in Joe's story, the stars went to the grandmothers who those first several years were with him. Although this grandmother left him at 8 because the mother was an alcoholic and the father and the mother were alienated, and so he had no contact, Joe had no contact with his wonderful grandmother and was basically cut off from her because he couldn't bring the children around the mother. So the father's mother was the one who was there, and so she gets a big star. She was delighted in him. And then what about school? What was school like for you? And so he moved about 5 times, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, but he didn't have a bad experience. And then middle school or junior high, when he grew up, it was positive. And through middle school and high school, he had friends, he played sports. And so he got a lot of affirmation from friends in high school. Church, 0 to 12 was a positive thing, although as a teenager, it was not negative, but he wasn't involved. His main interest was school, and that's where the stars come out here. His father gets a star because the father was kind to him, but after he married the stepmother, he kind of lost his father. One of the problems that Joe had is that when he was a boy, his memory of the conflict between the mother and father is he had a memory of his mother kicking the windshield and cursing his father to hell, and that was a very traumatic experience for him, so he felt sad for his father. And the stepmother, he said, sad for the father. So this gives you a picture. And also when he was a little boy, 0 to 7, the neighbors across the street took him in to nurture him because of the brokenness of the mother. So he bonded with the Reeds over here, and they were very nurturing and caring during those 7 years. Now we come to the place of the core beliefs. And so we put over here, I said, I want you, Joe, to think about 0 to 12 and complete this sentence as if you were 12 years of age. What I figured out that I need to do to survive or be secure is, what I figured out that I need to do to be valued, to be esteemed, to be significant is, and what I figured out that I need to do to have some kind of control over how people look at me. And so in your booklet, you're going to find core belief examples. And so give them the booklet and show them the examples. For example, what I figured out that I need to do to be secure or to survive or be safe is, and there's a list of things here: be good, obey, be perfect, work hard, be invisible, be silent, or some other. And just let them look at that list and let them think about it. And with Joe, after he thought about it, what he came up with, I need to be good. Poor daddy. So I'm going to be good so daddy doesn't get in trouble again. Now I move to affection and esteem in your book. What I figured out that I needed to be loved. So you hand that to them, let them look at that, and they will see perform to please, achieve to please, be the best, be attractive, be helpful, or some other. What were you, looking back, what did you do to gain affirmation? And with Joe, his was to perform. He did it in sports, he did it socially, to dancing, but mainly he performed to please. Now, Joe, what did you figure out that you need to do to have some control over how people look at me? And you go to the booklet and go to power and control, and you see a list there. There's some possibilities like be funny, be humorous, be nice, complicit, fit in, be cute, be strong, show no weakness, be smart, or what other. Let them think about it. Just set it in front of them and let them think about it. And for Joe, it was be strong. No weakness. And now I'll have Joe. I said, Joe, I want you to picture yourself as 12 years of age and put your arm around little Joe and tell Joe what his wound is. And in your booklet, there are some examples of what possible wounds. And so you can show them what some wounds are, like abandoned, rejected, outcast, invisible, not seen, or some other. And so Joe thought about it, and he said, I felt abandoned. I didn't see my mother for 18 years, and my father was gone after he married the stepmother, Louise. Now, Joe, everybody as a child has some kind of gut feeling about how they feel about themselves. So I want you to reach down and kind of pull out the lie. For example, children are the best recorders, worst interpreters. So what's the lie you felt down in your gut? And so you go again to your book, and you can look in your book, and there's some possible lies. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough. I'm less than. I'm a failure. For Joe, his core lie was, it is up to me. If I make it, I'm responsible. And so his lie was, I'm responsible. It's up to me if I make it. And then there's the core truth. Now, this is a very interesting one. The whole philosophy behind doing the story is around one thing that I believe. That's the reason I do this, is that there's nothing in the world more important than a human being. So in the bottom of your core story booklet, it says the core truth, and I've listed 5 choices. I'm of immeasurable value. I am loved. I am forgiven. I'm not alone. I'm a gift. Or one lady she says, I'm chosen. So I have them pick one of these core truths, or one at least as significant or as equal to these. And so Joe said, I am not alone. Now, once you get the story laid out like this, here's what you do. First thing you do, you always do this. You always thank the person. Look them in the eye and say, thank you for sharing your story. And I really appreciate it. And when you look up on the board, Joe, what is interesting to you? What jumps out at you? And listen to Joe talk about how, because it's for the first time they're seeing their story. There's no new information on this board, but they're seeing it kind of like flying over and looking at their life, and they're seeing brokenness, abandonment. They're seeing confusion and chaos. So this little boy grew up in all of that. And I said, what do you see? And then after Joe shares and you're not looking, just whatever strikes you, Joe. And Joe gives his response. And then you say, well, Joe, let me tell you how my story is similar or different. And you share with Joe how yours is similar or different. And if you're in a group setting, you do the same thing. You thank him, and then you have the people in the group share with Joe how their story is similar or different. It's very, very powerful because people say, well, my parents divorced when I was 15 years old. And they begin to bond, and compassion jumps out. So after looking at the story and talking and responding to one another, then you make this particular observation. And it's so important to understand your story. In the ancient Proverbs, it says, understanding is the fountain of life. So I want to make a point here that's really, really important. So when you see your story, you become aware. Now I'm going to give you some information, Joe, that most people don't know, but when I tell you, you're going to know it's true. For example, when you become aware of your story, what you know is true, when you get under stress, it doesn't matter what you know, you go back to what you believe. These are 12-year-old beliefs. You get under stress, and they work for you as a child. In fact, these were gifts to Joe that helped him survive a really chaotic and hostile environment. But under stress, he will try to be good. He'll try to, for particularly Joe, since he felt like he had to take care of his father, he's going to want to be the one to help everybody. It's what's called a parentified child, a child who feels like he has to parent the father, and so then abandoned by the mother. So, and he's got to perform and got to be good. So, but I told Joe something very interesting, and I think this is where you want to do this. Because Joe needs to understand that he missed a star, and the star is Joe. This is a lot of pain here, Joe. Your life is bigger than this, and you're larger than your pain. But understand, when you get under stress, you're going to go to these beliefs. And the reality is, these beliefs helped you as a child, but as an adult, these beliefs are toxic. When you get married and build a life together, if you try to live by the 12-year-old beliefs, they don't work. And the problem with these 12-year-old beliefs is they become your enemy. And what I mean by this is this is your standard for yourself. And you can't measure up to your standards, so you're going to find, Joe, that you're harder on yourself than on anybody else. And so these beliefs become toxic. Now I want to go to Joe, and I say, Joe, I want you to put your arm around your 12-year-old and tell your 12-year-old what your wound is. And this is where Joe names his wound. Now, I want to place something here on the board that's very important to see. Because, Joe, this is your greatest gift. You get to choose. And you've got the lie here, I mean, the wound that you're abandoned, but this lie, it's up to me is very, very painful, because what we do is 95% of our behavior is driven by this lie. So we're trying to function, be good, perform to please, to be strong, to take care of this lie. And we're doing external things to take care of an internal problem. And so there are no quick fixes, there are no easy answers, but there is a process. And the process becomes a choice that you make to renounce this lie and revoke it. So that's a conscious decision, because our feelings are rooted here in this lie. It's up to me. I've got to do it. If it gets done, I got to do it. And it's a terrible burden. And Joe is under great stress. And so this lie. So what do? You make a choice to replace this lie with your core truth, and you replace the lie and you respond to this truth that I'm not alone. Now, here's where you're going to have to use your mind, because your feelings are rooting here, and you understand when you look at your story, there's an oppression here of a child who grows up in an environment that's dysfunctional, that's hostile, and this is how he survives. And what we've learned is, through the years, with good information and safety, you can determine that this really is the truth. You are loved, you are forgiven, you are beloved. And in a marriage, when couples understand this story, when the mate gets under stress and they understand that, they're able to get along beside him and not be judgmental to them. So here's the metaphor that I use. So these are the pair of lenses that you look at your life through the 12-year-old, but when you become an adult, you put on a new pair of glasses. And what I've learned, if you give people safety, good information, and time, they can figure out that this is the truth. But that takes time. It's a process. The story helps you understand your story. You understand your 12-year-old beliefs that will crush you as an adult because you can't measure up. You understand why you were abandoned. But the key and the secret is here, is the lie. And this is why we have so many people committing suicide today. They believe a lie. I'm worthless, I don't count, I don't matter, there's no room for failure. And if they don't know and have time to process and think through the information to understand, this is the truth. You are loved, you are forgiven, you are of value. Over the last 50 years, I have heard whispered in my ears thousands of stories in India, Israel, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guyana, Guatemala. And what the story has done, it's opened the hearts of people to understand their story. And what it does is it brings hope to people. And so as you train to do this story, you're going to see something absolutely amazing. When they see the stars in their story, or like some, they have no stars, and you're able to affirm their greatness just because they've overcome incredible odds. And so the core story provides a path for healing and hope. Now here's the bottom line, the value of the core story. There is nothing in the world more important than a human being. And what happens when they map the story and they're seeing it visually and cognitively and experientially? There's an awakening. And there's a surprise, because people realize, I've been being controlled by a 12-year-old belief that says I'm not good enough, I'm less than, I'm worthless, there's no room for failure, and I don't matter. That's a 12-year-old belief. And they see it. And they see the stars, and they see the generational movement, an empty way many times it's been handed down to them. And the beautiful thing that you're able to give them, he said, you know, you've got two incredible gifts. Number one, you've got a brain, and you're not going to let a 12-year-old kick you around. And number two, you get to choose, because your greatness is rooted in the fact that you're a human being, and human beings are what really matter. Now here's a secret. You'll remember this. And as you do the story, you want to remind them of this, that children are the best recorders and worst interpreters. That's very important. Because what happens is people freeze or get stuck or fuse around this lie. And we're in an incredible time in history. Soldiers, we have 22 soldiers a day committing suicide because they believe that lie. Suicide is growing rampant among even children. And so when you map the story and they see and they understand, you help them see. You know you have a choice. You can choose to accept the fact that you have incredible worth. Now, there are two things. One of the things the core story does, it gives you understanding, and healing and hope come to people when they're fully heard and fully understood. In marriages, when married couples who are stuck on their expectations and they realize their expectations are killing their marriage, and they approach each other with understanding, a depth of understanding, everything changes. And particularly when you make a shift from the core lie to the core truth. That's the truth. And we anchor people on the core truth, and we get people in conversation around the core truth. So understanding is the key, but the next thing you're going to need is knowledge. And so I want to offer a few books for you if you want to go a little deeper. One of them was written by my professor in Boston University, Dr. Merle Jordan. The first book he wrote was entitled Taking on the Gods. The second book he wrote was entitled Reclaiming Your Story. And then I want to recommend a book written by my mentor and friend, James Woodruff, entitled Sayings That Saved My Sanity. And then I wrote a book about 8 years ago, which sort of does reveal the process of the dismantling of the lie that I adopted as a child. It's entitled Delta Blues from Darkness to Light. And the last group of material is incredible, 3 booklets. It's called The Heart Table. And you can go to hearttable.org and get this information. There are 3 books. There's a host guide, which shows you all the material on how to do the story. The second volume of the Heart Table is a 40-day journal where you're processing the moments in your story with friends and with your mate. And the third one is building space for that invisible presence and appreciation for yourself. Thank you so much. All the best to you. I think you're in for a wonderful surprise as you use the core story.